Netflix's third season of The Night Agent has arrived with more political scheming and intrigue. So you going to be watching? Night Agent Peter Sutherland is called in to track down a young Treasury agent who fled with sensitive government intel after killing his boss. This spurs the investigation of a dark money network, putting him on a collision course with a relentless journalist. Working together, they uncover buried secrets and old grudges that threaten to bring the government to its knees, and maybe get them both killed in the process. Gabriel Basso is back as Agent Sutherland, and just like in previous seasons, the character, he feels stiff and not very comfortable in his own skin. We're treated to more personal introspection this time from Peter, so it does go to explain many of his quirks and standoffish demeanor. And for this arc of the story, Peter ends up getting mixed up in a massive financial operation that jeopardizes the security of the nation while also bringing him back again into the sphere of the broker. The season's made up of 10 episodes that are all around an hour, and for the first 2, maybe 3 episodes, the pacing and the storytelling, they're kind of rough. The introduction to the plot and then the action sequences we get, they're meant to instill excitement and some thrills, but they end up being lackluster and uninspired. Even when there's a car chase through narrow streets, these are dull thanks to how few obstacles the drivers have to maneuver, combined with how the scenes were shot, creating more of a sense of a leisurely Sunday drive than one attempting to evade attackers. Now, I do have to give credit, though, for one in-car shot during this dry chase. Peter is barreling a vehicle down an alley in reverse, and because of the camera placement within the back seat, we get a passenger's experience as Peter swings the car around to face forward before then gunning it down the street. I wanted more sequences like that, but just about any time we get a vehicle chase, the shot is so zoomed in that we're missing all of that context around the car and then the fight, which then help to deliver scale and motion, which then also builds more excitement. Now, even though the first few episodes aren't awesome, the story does find its footing and gets into a groove that creates some urgency, mystique, and some heartfelt moments. As we get deeper into the story, the complications create some emotional beats that allow us to see Peter in different lights, taking him from stiff and impersonal to at least someone who has some deep-seated reasons for his drive. I think the political intrigue gets a bit lost in the plot overall, just thanks to assassins, unknown potential terrorist ties, government insiders, financial investigations, and then some romantic elements, which are all vying for attention during the episodes. And this isn't to say that the story's difficult to follow or that it can't be fun. There's just a lot going on, and some of it receives more time and attention than is really warranted, especially when it's only a periphery point meant to create background on a more prominent element. There is one semi-side story that does end up working extremely well in terms of reinforcing a storyline central to Peter. This involves an assassin who's sent to, just take care of issues. But it's the moments we watch when the person isn't tracking someone down to end them. We get large glimpses into their life that works to build a bit of an emotional conundrum to how we respond to this trained killer. Now, sometimes the sequences, they felt forced or maybe too schmaltzy, but thanks to the amount of time that we do get to spend with this person, there comes a moment that capitalizes on all of that development in a way that feels earned, and although it is a bit contradictory to the profession, it's satisfying. This season feels as though it's also upped the stakes in terms of what is allowed to happen to characters. Now, I was a bit surprised with what happens to some, building out maybe a more dire and treacherous adventure than one where we are absolutely certain all of our heroes are going to make it home alive. One of the new additions to the cast is David Lyons, playing a former soldier with some friends in very high places. And while his character's personality and motives are pretty clear right from the start, I did grow to appreciate the dynamic that he builds with Peter. They're not all lovey-dovey, and in fact, they're pretty strained at first. But then they find this cadence that works, once more crafting a character and relationship within the show that can be a little emotionally confusing. Another new addition to this season is Stephen Moyer. Now, he's enigmatic and quiet, but I loved watching his performance because he's sort of a chameleon, or maybe a sort of split personality. I'm not referring to any mental health disorder, but instead his character just plays both sides of an identity very convincingly, almost employing this psychopathic sort of mindset. His demeanor, it's unsettling while also being sympathetic and then intriguing. I enjoyed the complexity of his persona. Lucienne Buchanan, who plays Rose Larkin in the previous 2 seasons, she doesn't make an appearance this time, which does make sense given how last season resolved. But for a new damsel in distress for Peter to protect, we get Genesis Rodriguez playing Isabel. She's an investigative journalist working on the financial aspect of the mystery. Now, I liked what her character's introduction brings to the show. There's this connection that I didn't see coming, which made the surprise nice and fresh. But I also like that she doesn't fall all head over heels for Peter either. She's this strong character who isn't actually the wilting flower in need of protection, even though the plot really wants to paint her in that way some of the time. I think there were some opportunities to shave the season down a bit. Not only does the story get a bit too complicated for its own good, as I'd mentioned before, but this ends up slowing down some of the momentum that the narrative works hard at establishing. There's an episode that is almost fully a flashback, taking a lot of time to dive into a character's backstory that may not have needed as much focus as it received. Some of the flashback does inform on key plot elements, but another large chunk of the story within this also focuses on a character who comes across as more influential and weighty than the show really delivers on. This also goes back to how I was talking about some elements getting lost in the shuffle. One of the supposed central plot points is that of a terrorist organization that's an imminent threat to the United States government. But these only pop in and out of the storytelling briefly and sporadically, illustrating that they're actually not as important as the dialogue makes them out to be. So they're just another half idea that gets in the way of the thrilling story pieces. And specifically in that flashback episode, so much of that story feels as though it was lifted directly from Ozark, with only some names and maybe minor details changed for this show. There was even a monologue of sorts that lays out certain character motivations, and all I could see was Marty Byrde just trying to talk his way out of being shot right on the spot. So while the season does start off in a less than thrilling manner, and the story gets in its own way several times to make the plot jumbled and searching for focus, while also being a bit too long, the show does finally get its groove and ultimately delivers an exciting and intense adventure. There are many conveniences built in, along with plot and character protections, to allow elements easy passage. And even though the acting can be stiff or impersonal at times, the show still manages to deliver some emotionally poignant arcs. At the end of this, I found myself engaged and tracking along with the plot. It's far from a great show, but it is entertaining. There's no sex or nudity, a lot of profanity, and then a bunch of violence. I give Season 3 of The Night Agent 3.5 out of 5 couches. All right, do you have any favorite espionage or maybe government intrigue-themed shows? Now, I enjoyed The Unit back in the day, and then I have really been enthralled by The Diplomat on Netflix. Let me know some of those, though, that you like in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.